The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that had fallen between them. Rain pattered against the windows, matching the mood inside the modest two-bedroom house where Diane and Renee had built their life together. 12 years of marriage hung in the balance as Diane clutched a bank statement in her trembling hand. "I just don't understand," Diane said, her voice quieter than she intended. $3,000 gone, and you won't tell me where it went." Renee stood by the refrigerator, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the linoleum floor. The kitchen light cast shadows across her face, highlighting the angles of her cheekbones and the stubborn set of her jaw. "It's for work expenses," Renee muttered. "I told you already." Diane slapped the paper onto the kitchen table. "Work expenses that you can't show me receipts for? That don't appear on any of your freelance contracts?" She pushed her graying hair away from her face. At 46, Diane had spent the last 15 years of her life with Renee. The last 3 years, though, something had changed. "You don't need to see every little thing I spend money on," Renee said, finally looking up. Her eyes held that distant look again, the one that had become all too familiar lately. The dishwasher hummed in the background as Diane took a deep breath. "We agreed when we got married that we'd be open about our finances. We promised each other that." Outside, a car door slammed, and voices drifted in from the street, neighbors arriving home, their lives continuing normally while Diane felt her world crumbling around her. "Things change," Renee said flatly. "Like what?" Diane asked, her voice rising. "What's changed that you need to hide thousands of dollars from our joint account without telling me? We're barely making the mortgage as it is." The truth was they had been struggling financially for months. Diane's job as a high school librarian barely covered half their expenses, and Renee's freelance consulting work had always been irregular. At least that's what Renee had always told her. Renee walked to the sink and poured herself a glass of water, taking a long, slow sip before answering. "I have clients who need discretion. I've explained this before. Discretion doesn't mean hiding things from your wife." Diane felt the familiar knot forming in her stomach, the one that appeared whenever they fought about money lately. "This isn't the first time either. Last month it was $2,500. The month before that, $4,000. You're keeping track?" Renee's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Of course I'm keeping track. Someone has to. I'm the one who gets calls from the bank when we're overdrawn. I'm the one figuring out which bills to pay late." The refrigerator kicked on with a low hum, filling another uncomfortable silence. Their cat, an elderly tabby named Mr., jumped onto the counter and meowed plaintively. "Get down," Renee said, gently pushing the cat away. She turned back to Diane with a sigh. "Look, I know things have been tight, but I'm handling it. You just need to trust me." Diane let out a bitter laugh. "Trust you? When you're clearly hiding something from me?" She pulled out her phone and opened their banking app. "Look at this. For the past year there have been withdrawals, cash withdrawals that you can't explain. And somehow you always have an excuse for why you need to go out of town for these mysterious conferences that you never bring back materials from." Renee's face hardened. "Are you spying on me now?"
"It's our joint account."
"It's not spying to look at our own finances." Diane felt heat rising to her cheeks. "And don't try to turn this around on me. You're the one keeping secrets." The clock on the microwave changed numbers, marking another minute of their deteriorating relationship. In the living room, framed photos from happier times seemed to watch them. Their wedding day at the beach, hiking in the mountains, holidays with friends who they rarely saw anymore because Renee always had an excuse to avoid socializing. "Maybe this isn't working anymore," Renee said quietly, looking around the kitchen as if seeing it for the first time. The words hit Diane like a physical blow. "What isn't working? Our marriage?" "I don't know, Di. Maybe." Renee looked tired suddenly, the lines around her eyes more pronounced. "We want different things. Since when? What do you want that I don't know about?" Diane stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "We've been together since we were 30. We've built this whole life together. We talked about growing old in this house. People change." "No," Diane said, her voice cracking. "People don't just change overnight. Something happened." "Someone happened?" The thought had crossed her mind before, but she'd always pushed it away. "There's no one else," Renee said firmly, meeting Diane's eyes for the first time that evening. "It's not that. Then what?" "What is so important that you're willing to throw away 12 years of marriage? That you're stealing from our future?" "I'm not stealing anything." Renee snapped, her calm facade finally cracking. It's my money, too. That you're hiding from me. That you're lying about. Diane felt tears threatening but held them back. I had to cancel my dental appointment last week because we supposedly couldn't afford it, while you're taking out thousands for… What? What is so important? Renee turned away, staring out the kitchen window into the darkness of their backyard. The wooden swing they'd installed last summer swayed slightly in the evening breeze. It's complicated. Then uncomplicated for me, Diane pleaded. Just tell me the truth. For a moment, Renee seemed to consider it. Her shoulders dropped and she turned halfway toward Diane, her expression softening. Then just as quickly, the walls came back up. I can't, not yet. Not yet? What does that even mean? Diane grabbed the bank statement again, shaking it in frustration. We're supposed to be partners. We promised to face everything together. Some things I need to handle alone. That's not how marriage works. Diane's voice echoed in the small kitchen. Mr. ran from the room, startled by the outburst. Renee checked her watch, a new one that Diane had noticed last week but hadn't commented on. Another unexplained expense. I have a call in 20 minutes. Can we talk about this later? A call? At 8:30 at night? Diane laughed incredulously. With who? A client in Tokyo, Renee said smoothly. Time zone differences. Right. Diane crossed her arms. The mysterious international clients you never name who pay you in cash, apparently. Renee grabbed her laptop from the counter. I'm going to take this in the office. No. Diane stepped in front of her, blocking the doorway. We're not done talking about this. I am. Renee's voice was cold now. Move, please. Not until you tell me what's really going on. Diane stood her ground, heart pounding. No more excuses. No more vague explanations. I want the truth. They stood there at an impasse, the air between them thick with unspoken words and growing resentment. The house creaked and settled around them, a home that suddenly felt more like a battleground. Finally, Renee spoke, her voice low and controlled. There are things happening that I can't explain right now. I need you to trust me a little longer. I've been trusting you for months while our savings disappear and our credit card debt piles up, Diane said. I'm done trusting blindly. Something flickered in Renee's eyes. Fear, maybe, or resignation. She set her laptop down on the counter and ran a hand through her short dark hair. What do you want from me, Diane? The truth. All of it, now. Renee hesitated, then shook her head. I can't give you that. The simple admission broke something in Diane. 12 years of love and trust shattered by 5 simple words. She felt suddenly calm, the kind of calm that comes when a decision that's been brewing finally crystallizes. Then I think you should leave. Renee blinked, clearly not expecting this. What? If you can't be honest with me, if you can't treat me as your equal partner in this marriage, then you need to go. Diane's voice was steady now, despite the storm raging inside her. I won't live like this anymore, wondering what you're hiding. Watching our financial security drain away with no explanation. You're overreacting, Renee said. But there was uncertainty in her voice. Am I? Diane pulled open a drawer and took out their household budget notebook, flipping it open to show page after page of red numbers. We're 1 bad month away from losing this house. The house we bought together. The house we promised to grow old in. She closed the book with a snap. And you're taking out cash by the thousands with no explanation. That's not overreacting. That's self-preservation. They stood in silence for a long moment, the refrigerator's hum the only sound between them. Fine, Renee said finally. I'll pack a bag. The ease with which she accepted it was perhaps the most painful part. Diane had expected arguments, tears, promises to change, not this calm acceptance. That's it? You're just going to go? Diane felt the first tear escape, trailing down her cheek. Renee picked up her laptop again. You asked me to leave. I'm respecting that. I asked you to be honest, Diane corrected. Leaving is your choice. Renee looked around the kitchen one last time, her gaze lingering on the small details. The chipped mug Diane always used for her morning coffee. The refrigerator covered with magnets from places they'd visited together. The window herb garden they'd planted last spring. I'll be back for the rest of my things later, she said quietly. Then walked past Diane toward the stairs. Diane stood frozen in the kitchen, listening to the sounds of drawers opening and closing upstairs, the familiar rhythm of Renee moving around their bedroom. 20 minutes later, Renee came back downstairs with a single suitcase and her laptop bag. She paused at the front door, looking back at Diane, who had followed her silently. "I do love you, you know. That was never a lie." Diane said nothing, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Without another word, Renee opened the door and stepped out into the rain. The sound of the door closing behind her echoed through the suddenly empty house. Diane walked slowly back to the kitchen and sank into a chair, her mind racing with questions. Why had Renee given up so easily? What could possibly be worth throwing away their marriage? And most troubling of all, what secrets were so important that Renee would choose them over the life they'd built together? The kitchen clock continued its steady ticking, marking the first moments of Diane's new reality. Outside, she heard a car engine start and then fade away down the street. Mr. crept back into the kitchen and jumped into her lap, purring softly. "It's just us now," she whispered to the cat, stroking his fur as the first sob finally broke free. 2 weeks had passed since Renee walked out the door. Diane moved through her days in a fog, going through the motions at work, forcing smiles for concerned colleagues, and coming home to a house that felt too big and too quiet. Mr. followed her from room to room, as if sensing her need for company. The morning mail brought the usual stack of bills and flyers. Diane sorted through them at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold at her elbow. Electric bill, water bill, credit card statement. The regular reminders of a life that was suddenly hers alone to manage. Then she saw it. A thick cream-colored envelope addressed to Renee, the return address showing a law firm she'd never heard of. Lancaster. "We and Associates," Diane set it aside at first, planning to add it to the small pile of Renee's mail that had accumulated over the past 2 weeks. But something about the envelope nagged at her. After finishing the rest of the mail, she picked it up again, turning it over in her hands. Renee hadn't contacted her since leaving, hadn't even texted to ask about the mail or the rest of her belongings. The silence hurt more than the arguments had. "I shouldn't," Diane murmured to Mr., who watched her with unblinking yellow eyes from his perch on the counter. But the memory of those unexplained withdrawals, the secrecy that had torn their marriage apart, pushed her fingers under the envelope's flap. Inside was a letter on the law firm's letterhead and several folded documents. Diane's eyes scanned the first paragraph, then stopped, her breath catching in her throat. Quarterly statement for offshore accounts totaling 97,432,158 were as of the end of last month. She read the number again, certain she'd misunderstood. $97 million? That couldn't be right. Her hands trembling, Diane unfolded the attached statements. Page after page of transactions, account numbers, investment portfolios, all in Renee's name. The smallest account held just over $2 million. The largest, nearly $40 million. Diane's coffee cup slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, sending ceramic shards and lukewarm liquid across the linoleum. Mr. leapt down and scurried from the room, but Diane barely noticed. Her eyes remained fixed on the papers in front of her. All those years of penny pinching, of calculating whether they could afford to fix the leaky bathroom faucet, of Diane picking up extra shifts during summer school to make ends meet, while Renee apparently had millions stashed away in secret accounts. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. Diane stood up, papers clutched in her hand, and walked unsteadily to the living room. She sank onto the couch, surrounded by the life they'd built together. The second-hand furniture they'd refinished themselves. The throw blanket Renee's mother had knitted for them. The walls they'd painted together over a long weekend 5 years ago. All of it felt like a lie now. She forced herself to read through the documents more carefully. The accounts were spread across banks in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore. Most had been opened within the last 3 years. Around the same time, Renee had started taking those frequent business trips. The letter mentioned something called Phoenix Dynamics, apparently a technology company with Renee listed as the majority shareholder. There were references to patents, licensing agreements, and something called Algorithm X37 that seemed to be the primary asset. None of it made sense. Renee was a freelance IT consultant who helped small businesses set up their networks and troubleshoot computer problems. At least that's what she'd claimed to be doing for the past decade. Diane's phone buzzed with a text from Kelly, the English teacher who had become her closest friend at school. "Still on for lunch?" I can pick you up in 20. Reality came crashing back. It was Saturday, and she'd agreed to meet Kelly for lunch downtown. Part of her wanted to cancel, to stay home and try to make sense of this bombshell, but another part desperately needed to talk to someone. To confirm she wasn't losing her mind. "See you soon," she texted back. 30 minutes later, Diane sat across from Kelly in a corner booth at their favorite cafe, the envelope and its contents tucked safely in her purse. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Kelly said, studying Diane's face with concern. "Are you okay?" Diane toyed with her water glass, unsure where to begin. "I found something this morning." "About Renee. Has she reached out?" Kelly asked, her expression softening. Kelly had been Diane's rock through the separation, bringing over casseroles and sitting with her through tearful evenings. "No, but—" Diane glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then lowered her voice. "A letter came for her today. From a law firm." Kelly's eyebrows shot up. "Is she filing for divorce already?" "It wasn't that kind of letter." Diane took a deep breath. "Kelly, the letter was about Renee's money." "A lot of money. What do you mean, a lot?" Diane leaned in closer. "Almost $100 million. Kelly's mouth fell open, her sandwich forgotten halfway to her lips. "That's not possible." "That's what I thought too." Diane pulled out the letter, sliding it across the table. "See for yourself." Kelly scanned the document, her eyes widening. "Holy, Diane, this is real. This is a legitimate law firm." She pulled out her phone and quickly searched the name. "Lancaster Way and Associates specializes in international finance and technology law. They're based in New York, but how? Where did she get this kind of money?" Diane's voice cracked. "We've been living paycheck to paycheck for years. I had to get a personal loan last summer just to fix the roof." Kelly continued reading through the documents, her expression growing more bewildered. "It says here she's the founder of something called Phoenix Dynamics. There are references to major investments from venture capital firms." She looked up at Diane. "Did you know anything about this?" Diane shook her head, feeling numb. "She told me she was a freelance IT consultant. Small jobs, local businesses, nothing special. While secretly running a multi-million-dollar tech company." Kelly handed the papers back, lowering her voice as a server passed by their table. I don't even know what that is. Fazar doesn't cover it." "I feel like I never knew her at all," Diane whispered, the reality of the situation sinking in deeper. 12 years of marriage, and she had this whole other life I knew nothing about. "What are you going to do?" Diane had been asking herself the same question since opening the envelope. "I don't know. Confront her, I guess, but I don't even know how to reach her. She hasn't answered any of my texts, and I don't know where she's staying." Kelly took a thoughtful sip of her iced tea. "Those business trips she was always taking. You said they started becoming more frequent about 3 years ago, right?" Diane nodded. "At least once a month, sometimes more. She said they were for conferences or on-site work with clients. But now we know they were probably for her secret company." Kelly tapped her fingers on the table. "Did she ever mention specific cities she was visiting?" Diane thought back, trying to recall details from conversations that now felt like they'd happened in another lifetime. "Boston came up a lot. San Francisco, sometimes New York. Tech hubs," Kelly noted. "Makes sense if she was running a technology company." There was another place she mentioned a few times, somewhere on the coast. Diane closed her eyes, trying to remember. Newport. She said she liked the ocean views there. Newport, Rhode Island? Kelly was already typing on her phone. "Fancy place. Old money, mansions, that kind of thing. I don't think she owns property there. I would have seen that in our tax returns." Even as she said it, Diane realized how naive she sounded. If Renee could hide $100 million in an entire company, hiding property wouldn't be difficult. "Maybe not under her name," Kelly suggested. "Look at these accounts. They're all under different corporate entities. Phoenix Holdings, RT Investments, Blue Harbor LLC. Diane felt a chill. Blue Harbor. She has a necklace with a little Blue Harbor pendant. I gave it to her for our anniversary years ago, but she started wearing it all the time recently." Kelly's eyes lit up. "That could be something. Let me see." She searched for property records in Newport under Blue Harbor LLC, scrolling through results. Here, Blue Harbor LLC purchased a property on Ocean Drive in Newport 2 years ago. Paid cash $8 million. Diane felt the room spin slightly. $8 million for a vacation home. while they'd been carefully budgeting for a weekend getaway to a nearby lakeside cabin last summer. There's a photo. Kelly turned her phone to show Diane a stunning modern mansion perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the blue sky, and a sleek infinity pool seemed to merge with the ocean beyond. "That can't be hers," Diane whispered, but even as she said it, she knew it probably was. The style matched Renee's taste exactly. The clean lines, the minimalist aesthetic, the way it blended with the natural surroundings. "What now?" Kelly asked, watching Diane's face carefully. Diane stared at the photo of the mansion, a plan forming in her mind. "I need to see for myself. I need to go to Newport." "Diane, are you sure that's a good idea? What if she's there?" "That's exactly what I'm hoping for." Diane folded the documents and tucked them back into her purse. "I deserve answers. Kelly, about the money, about the company, about why she's been lying to me for years. At least let me go with you," Kelly said, reaching across the table to squeeze Diane's hand. "You shouldn't face this alone." Diane nodded gratefully, squeezing back. "I'll need to take a few days off work. Can you cover my classes Monday and Tuesday?" "Consider it done," Kelly promised. "I'll tell Principal Vaughn there's a family emergency." Diane let out a hollow laugh. That's one way to put it. That evening, Diane sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open, booking flights to Providence and a rental car to drive to Newport. Each click brought her closer to confronting the stranger she'd been married to for 12 years. The woman who had shared her bed, her home, her life, all while building an empire in secret. As she confirmed the reservation, her gaze fell on their wedding photo on the wall. They looked so happy, so in love, standing on the beach with the sunset behind them. Had it all been a lie from the beginning? Or had something changed along the way? Mr. jumped onto the table and nudged her hand with his head, purring loudly. "We're going to get some answers," Diane told him softly, scratching behind his ears. "One way or another." The rental car hugged the curves of Ocean Drive as Diane and Kelly took in the stunning views of the Atlantic. Massive estates stood like sentinels along the coastline, each more impressive than the last. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across manicured lawns and glinted off windows, designed to capture every nuance of the ocean panorama. "These houses are unbelievable," Kelly whispered, as if speaking normally would somehow alert the wealthy residents to their presence. "Who even lives like this?" "Apparently my wife," Diane replied, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. After a sleepless night and a morning flight from home, they had arrived in Newport and picked up their rental car. The reality of what she was doing, essentially stalking her estranged spouse, was starting to sink in. "Take the next right," Kelly said, eyes on her phone's GPS. "Blue Harbor LLC's property should be about half a mile down. On the left." Diane slowed the car, her heart hammering in her chest. Part of her still couldn't believe any of this was real. The modest life she'd shared with Renee, the careful budgeting, the postponed vacations, the arguments over spending, seemed like a cruel joke now. "There," Kelly pointed as they rounded a bend. The house stood on a promontory overlooking the ocean, just as impressive in person as it had appeared in the property photos. A modern structure of glass, steel, and stone that seemed to grow organically from the coastal rock. A discreet sign at the gated entrance read simply Blue Harbor. Diane pulled the car to the side of the road, a safe distance from the entrance. "Now what?" she asked, her voice small. The enormity of the deception before her made her previous anger feel inadequate. "We could ring the bell," Kelly suggested, though she didn't sound convinced it was a good idea. "And say what? Hi, I'm your supposedly struggling wife who just discovered you're secretly a millionaire?" Diane let out a brittle laugh. "Besides, we don't even know if she's here." As if on cue, the gates began to slide open. Both women ducked down instinctively, peering over the dashboard as a sleek black Tesla emerged and turned toward town. "That's her," Diane gasped, recognizing Renee behind the wheel. Her hair was different, styled in a way Diane had never seen before, and she wore sunglasses that probably cost more than Diane's monthly salary. But it was definitely Renee. "Follow her?" Kelly asked. Diane nodded, waiting until the Tesla was a reasonable distance ahead before pulling onto the road. They followed at a careful distance as Renee drove into downtown Newport, eventually parking near the harbor. From a discreet distance, they watched as Renee walked confidently into an upscale restaurant overlooking the water. Through the large windows, they could see her being greeted warmly by the staff and escorted to a table on the patio. She looks like she belongs here, Kelly observed quietly. Like this is her normal life. Diane felt a stab of pain at the observation. In the 12 years they'd been together, they'd rarely eaten at restaurants this nice, and when they had, it had been for special occasions that they saved up for months to afford. "Let's go in," Diane said suddenly, straightening her jacket. "What? Just walk in there?" Kelly looked alarmed. "Are you sure?" "No," Diane admitted. "But I didn't fly all the way here to sit in a car and watch from a distance. I need answers." They found parking and walked to the restaurant, Diane's legs feeling increasingly unsteady with each step. Through the windows, she could see Renee typing on her phone, a glass of white wine at her elbow. She looked relaxed, content, happier than Diane had seen her in years. A host greeted them at the entrance. "Do you have a reservation?" "No, but we'd like a table on the patio if possible," Diane said, summoning confidence she didn't feel. "Near the water," the host hesitated. "I'm afraid the patio is fully booked for lunch today." "I could seat you inside near the windows." "That would be fine," Kelly answered when Diane seemed momentarily frozen. They were led to a table with a clear view of Renee, who still hadn't noticed them. Diane ordered a glass of wine she couldn't afford, needing something to steady her nerves. "What's the plan here?" Kelly whispered once the server had left. "Are you just going to walk up to her table?" Before Diane could answer, the restaurant door opened and a tall, distinguished-looking man with silver temples and an expensive suit walked in. The host greeted him warmly and led him directly to Renee's table. Diane watched as Renee stood up, smiling broadly, and kissed the man on both cheeks. They sat close together, immediately engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation. "Who is that?" Kelly wondered aloud, voicing the question screaming in Diane's. One was 20. Agonizing minutes passed as Diane watched her wife, the woman who had claimed to be a struggling IT consultant, dining with a man who exuded wealth and power. They ordered food Diane couldn't identify from where she sat, laughed easily together, and at one point, Renee reached across to touch the man's hand as she made some point in their conversation. "I can't do this," Diane said suddenly, standing up. "I need air." She walked quickly out of the restaurant, barely hearing Kelly call after her. Outside, she gulped the salty ocean air, tears threatening to spill. The betrayal felt too enormous to comprehend. Not just financial deception, but a whole secret life, perhaps even another relationship. Diane. Kelly had followed her out and now stood beside her, a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Let's walk a bit." They strolled along the harbor boardwalk, the cheerful sounds of tourists and seagulls at odds with Diane's turbulent emotions. "I don't even know what to think anymore," Diane said after a while. "It's like everything I thought I knew about her was a lie." "We don't know the whole story yet," Kelly reminded her gently. "That man could be a business associate." "A business associate she kisses on both cheeks and holds hands with?" Diane shook her head. "Besides, even if he is just a colleague, what about the rest of it? The money, the house, the company she never told me about?" They reached a small park overlooking the harbor and sat on a bench. Sailboats bobbed on the water, their white sails bright against the blue horizon. "I need to know more," Diane said finally. "About Phoenix Dynamics, about where all this money came from." Before I confront her, Kelly nodded thoughtfully. "My cousin works in tech venture capital in Boston. Let me call him, see if he's heard of Phoenix Dynamics." While Kelly made the call, Diane watched the boats and tried to make sense of her shattered reality. Had Renee ever loved her, or had their entire relationship been some kind of cover? And if so, why? What possible reason could someone have for pretending to be a struggling freelancer while secretly being worth millions? Kelly returned, her expression troubled. "My cousin knows of Phoenix Dynamics. They're legitimate. A cybersecurity firm specializing in proprietary algorithms for financial institutions. Very secretive, very exclusive. And Renee owns this company? According to my cousin, the CEO and founder uses the name Riley Thomas." Kelly hesitated. "He's never met her in person, but he's heard she's brilliant. Revolutionary approach to encryption or something like that." "Riley Thomas," Diane repeated. The name sounded vaguely familiar, though she couldn't place why. So Renee is using a fake name professionally? It seems that way. A thought struck Diane. The letter mentioned patents. If she's filed patents, those would be public record, right? Kelly brightened. "Good thinking." Let's find somewhere with Wi-Fi. They found a coffee shop nearby and settled at a corner table with their laptops. Diane searched for patents under both Renee's name and Riley Thomas. Nothing under Renee Taylor, she murmured, then tried the other name. Here we go. Riley Thomas has 16 patents filed in the last 4 years, all related to something called quantum-resistant blockchain encryption. That sounds impressive. Even though I have no idea what it means, Kelly said, reading over her shoulder. Diane clicked on one of the patents, scanning the technical language until she reached the inventor's brief biography. Riley Thomas received her PhD in computer science from MIT in... Wait. She stopped, staring at the screen. This says Riley Thomas was born Michael Thompson in Pittsburgh. Michael? As in a man? Diane's mind raced through a mental catalog of everything she knew about her wife. Renee never talked about her childhood. She said she was raised by her grandmother after her parents died, but she never wanted to discuss it. She has no photos from before college. You think Renee was born male? Kelly asked carefully. I don't know. Diane felt dizzy with the implications. I knew she had top surgery before we met. She told me it was after a cancer scare, and she takes hormone supplements that she said were for a thyroid condition. They looked at each other as the pieces started to fit together. That would explain why she's so private about her past, Kelly said, but not why she'd hide a fortune from you. Diane turned back to the computer, searching for Michael Thompson from Pittsburgh. Most results were too generic to be useful, but then she found an old newspaper article from 20 years earlier. Local tech prodigy involved in Pentagon security breach, she read aloud. Michael Thompson, 19, a sophomore at Carnegie Mellon University, is being questioned in connection with a serious security breach at the Department of Defense. Sources close to the investigation suggest Thompson may have accessed classified files related to military encryption protocols. The article went on to describe a promising young programmer who might have gone too far in testing security systems. No charges were ever filed, but Michael Thompson had been expelled from the university. So Renee, or Michael, was some kind of hacker. Kelly sounded incredulous. A hacker who may have had access to classified military encryption technology, Diane said slowly, and now runs a company specializing in advanced encryption. The implications were dizzying. Had Renee stolen government secrets? Was Phoenix Dynamics built on classified technology? Was that why she had kept her success secret? Because it was all illegal? I need to talk to her, Diane decided, shutting her laptop. Now, before this gets any more complicated. What about the man she was with? I don't care. I'm done with secrets and watching from a distance. Diane stood up, a new determination straightening her spine. I'm going to that house and I'm not leaving until I get the truth. As they drove back toward Blue Harbor, the sun was beginning to set, casting golden light across the coastal landscape. Diane rehearsed what she would say, how she would demand answers to questions she never imagined having to ask. The gates of Blue Harbor stood closed when they arrived. Diane pulled up to the intercom and pressed the button before she could lose her nerve. After a moment, a cautious voice answered. Yes? It was Renee. It's me, Diane said simply. We need to talk. A long silence followed, long enough that Diane thought Renee might simply ignore her. Then, without a word, the gates began to slide open. The driveway curved gently upward toward the house, bordered by tasteful landscaping that looked both expensive and effortless. As Diane drove through the open gates, her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. Kelly reached over and gave her arm a reassuring squeeze. Want me to stay in the car? Kelly asked quietly. Diane shook her head. I might need a witness to make sure I'm not imagining all this. They parked in front of the house where a set of wide stone steps led up to a massive glass door. Before they could even get out of the car, the door swung open and Renee stepped out. She looked different. Her hair was expertly styled, her clothes clearly designer, a far cry from the casual attire she'd worn at home. But it was more than that. She carried herself differently, with a confidence Diane had rarely seen in their years together. You found me, Renee said as Diane and Kelly approached. Her voice was neutral, impossible to read. Was it supposed to be difficult? Diane asked, struggling to keep her own voice steady. Renee's eyes flicked to Kelly, then back to Diane. I didn't expect you to bring company. I didn't expect to discover my wife was secretly worth $100 million, Diane countered. Seems like we're both full of surprises. A flash of something, guilt, annoyance, crossed Renee's face. You'd better come in. They followed her into a soaring entryway with a view straight through to the ocean beyond. The interior was sleek and modern with clean lines and carefully chosen art pieces that probably cost more than Diane's annual salary. Nice place, Kelly said into the awkward silence. Quite an upgrade from your split level in the suburbs. Renee shot her a cool look but didn't respond. Instead, she led them through to a spacious living area dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic. Can I get you anything? Water? Wine? Renee asked, her tone that of a polite host rather than a spouse caught in a massive deception. I think we're past the point of social niceties, don't you? Diane said. What I want are answers. Renee sighed, gesturing toward a seating area arranged to maximize the ocean view. How did you find me? A letter came to the house, Diane said, taking a seat on one of the minimalist couches. From your lawyers, about your quarterly statements. Lancaster and Way, Renee murmured, closing her eyes briefly. I told them to stop sending physical mail. Lucky for me they didn't listen, Diane said. Otherwise, I might still be cutting coupons to make our mortgage while you live in a mansion by the sea. Kelly, sensing the tension, moved toward the windows. I'm just going to admire this incredible view while you two talk. Once Kelly was out of earshot, Diane leaned forward. Who are you, really? Because the person I've been living with for 12 years, the one who said we couldn't afford a new car, who made me feel guilty for wanting to replace our 15-year-old couch. That person doesn't own an $8 million beach house. Renee's composure faltered slightly. It's complicated. So uncomplicate it for me, Diane demanded. Start with your name. Is it really Renee Taylor, or Riley Thomas, or should I call you Michael Thompson? Renee's face went pale. How do you know those names? I did some research. Turns out the internet knows quite a bit about brilliant hackers who get kicked out of college for breaching Pentagon security. A look of genuine alarm crossed Renee's face. Keep your voice down, please. She glanced toward Kelly, who was still politely examining the view. Why? Afraid your wealthy neighbor might hear that you're a fraud? I'm not a fraud, Renee said, her voice hardening. Riley Thomas is a legitimate identity, legally established. And yes, I was born Michael Thompson, but I legally changed my name years ago before we ever met. That's what you think I care about? Diane asked incredulously. That you're transgender? Renee, I've known that since our third date. Confusion crossed Renee's face. What, how? I never told you. You didn't have to. I'm not completely oblivious. Diane shook her head. I didn't care then and I don't care now. What I care about is that you've been lying to me about everything else. About who you are, about what you do. About having enough money to buy a small country while I worked extra shifts to pay our electric bill. Renee seemed genuinely taken aback. You knew? All this time? And you never said anything? I figured you'd tell me when you were ready. I respected your privacy. Diane laughed bitterly. Apparently that was a one-way street. A tense silence fell between them. Outside, waves crashed against the rocks below the property, a rhythmic sound that seemed at odds with the chaos of the moment. I always meant to tell you about the money, Renee finally said. When it was safe. Safe from what? Renee stood up and walked to a cabinet, pulling out a bottle of scotch and pouring herself a generous measure. She didn't offer any to Diane. Do you know what Phoenix Dynamics does? She asked after taking a sip. Something about encryption. Cybersecurity. Renee nodded. We develop algorithms that protect financial systems from quantum computing attacks. In simple terms, when quantum computers become advanced enough, which could be any day now, they'll be able to break most existing encryption. That means bank accounts, nuclear codes, power grids, all vulnerable. And you've solved this problem? I've created a solution, yes. One that works better than anyone else's. Renee's voice took on a hint of pride. The algorithm I developed is now protecting trillions of dollars in assets worldwide. Congratulations, Diane said flatly. That still doesn't explain why you kept it secret from your wife. Renee took another drink. The core of the algorithm, the breakthrough, came from that security breach at the Pentagon 20 years ago. So you did steal it. I didn't steal anything, Renee said sharply. I saw it. A few lines of code in a classified system that nobody else recognized the potential of. I memorized it, developed it, transformed it into something entirely new, but based on classified technology. Inspired by it, Renee corrected. What I've built is my own creation, but if certain people knew about its origins, you'd go to prison, Diane finished. Renee nodded grimly. At minimum. More likely I'd disappear into some black site facility never to be seen again. The technology is too valuable, too powerful. From across the room, Kelly cleared her throat. Should I step outside for this part of the conversation? It's fine, Renee said wearily. You're here now. Might as well hear it all. Kelly rejoined them, sitting beside Diane on the couch. For what it's worth, this all sounds like the plot of a spy thriller. Welcome to my life, Renee muttered. Diane tried to process what she was hearing. So you built a company on questionably acquired government insights, became filthy rich, and decided the best cover story was to pretend to be a struggling IT consultant married to a school librarian. When you put it that way, it sounds ridiculous, Renee admitted. But yes, essentially. Who was the man you were having lunch with today? Diane asked, the question that had been burning in her mind. Victor Zhao. He's the CEO of Global Financial Security. They're one of our biggest clients. Just a client? You seemed very familiar. A flash of understanding crossed Renee's face. You were at the restaurant. That's how you found me today. She shook her head. Victor is gay, Diane, and married. He's also a friend who knows my real identity, one of the few who does. Diane absorbed this, feeling slightly foolish for her jealousy but still overwhelmed by the larger deception. Why maintain the pretense with me? After all these years, why not just tell me the truth? Renee set her glass down, looking genuinely distressed for the first time. At first, it was because I barely knew you. I couldn't risk my secret getting out. Then as we got more serious, I worried you might leave if you knew I'd been lying. And finally, she hesitated. Finally, I realized I loved the life we had. The life where I worked 60-hour weeks and you pretended to struggle alongside me? Diane asked incredulously. The life where I was just Renee, she replied quietly. Not a tech genius, not a wealthy CEO, not someone with a target on her back. Just a normal person with a normal life and a wife who loved me for me, not for what I could provide. The raw honesty in her voice made Diane pause. She thought about their life together, the quiet evenings, the simple pleasures, the genuine connection they'd shared. Had it all been fake? The money I took from our account, Renee continued. It was going to an offshore setup. I was building a safety net for us, for when I finally told you the truth. A way for us to disappear if we ever needed to. Disappear? Kelly interjected. That sounds extreme. The technology I've developed is worth billions to the right buyer, Renee explained. Not all of those potential buyers play nice. I've had threats, attempted hacks, even a break-in at our main office last year. So that's why you finally left, Diane said, pieces clicking into place. Something happened. Something that made staying dangerous. Renee nodded slowly. A week before our fight, I received a warning from a contact in government intelligence. Someone had connected Riley Thomas to Renee Taylor. They were watching our house. A chill ran down Diane's spine. Our house? You let me stay there alone? I had security in place, Renee said quickly. The best available. But yes, I needed to draw any potential threat away from you. That's why I left so easily when you asked me to go. It was the perfect opportunity to distance myself from you, to keep you safe. While letting me think our marriage was falling apart, Diane said, the hurt evident in her voice. I was going to come back for you, Renee insisted. Once I'd secured everything, created new identities for us both. I was setting it all up when you found me. How convenient. Renee stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the darkening sky. Nothing about this has been convenient. Diane, I've spent 12 years living a double life, constantly looking over my shoulder, terrified that my past would catch up with me, or worse, that it would catch up with you. The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. For the first time since discovering the letter, Diane felt her anger giving way to confusion. Why didn't you just trust me? She asked, her voice smaller now. We took vows. For better or worse. This was way beyond for worse, Renee said, turning back to face her. This was asking you to give up your entire life, maybe forever. How could I make that choice for you? Kelly, who had been quiet for some time, cleared her throat. Not to intrude on this moment, but if people were watching your house, is it safe for Diane to go back there? The question hung in the air between them. Renee's expression darkened. No, she said finally. It's probably not. 6 months had passed since that evening in Newport. Diane stood on the balcony of her new apartment, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of gold and pink. So much had changed in such a short time that sometimes she still woke up disoriented, momentarily forgetting the new reality of her life. The sliding glass door opened behind her, and Kelly stepped out with 2 glasses of wine. "Thought you could use this," Kelly said, handing one to Diane. "Big day tomorrow." Diane accepted the glass with a grateful smile. "Thanks for coming over. I'm more nervous than I expected to be." "Perfectly normal to be nervous before your first board meeting," Kelly replied, leaning against the railing, "especially when it's for your own foundation." The Lighthouse Foundation had been Diane's idea, born in the aftermath of discovering Renee's deception. Its mission, to help people who had been victims of financial abuse and deception in relationships. The irony wasn't lost on her that it was Renee's money, part of the settlement they had negotiated, that had funded it. "Sometimes I still can't believe any of this is real," Diane said, taking a sip of her wine. "A year ago I was worrying about paying the electric bill. And now you're a philanthropist with a penthouse apartment," Kelly finished for her. "Life is strange." Inside, Diane's phone chimed with a notification. She ignored it, knowing it was probably just another update from her lawyer about the ongoing legal proceedings. After that night in Newport, things had moved quickly and in unexpected directions. "Have you heard from her?" Kelly asked carefully, always sensitive about bringing up Renee. Diane nodded. "Another encrypted email this morning. Same as always, checking if I'm safe, if I need anything." After the confrontation at Blue Harbor, they had only spent one more night together. Renee had explained everything in detail, about Phoenix Dynamics, about the people who might be after her technology, about the plan she'd been developing to disappear and start over somewhere new. "I still think it's weird that she never tries to see you," Kelly said. "It's safer this way," according to her. Diane's tone was neutral. The raw pain of those early months now dulled to a kind of wistful acceptance. "Besides, with all the legal scrutiny she's under, it's probably better that we're not in contact." The investigation into Phoenix Dynamics had become public shortly after Diane returned home from Newport. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the FBI, and half a dozen other agencies were looking into allegations of corporate espionage, tax evasion, and potential national security violations. Renee, or Riley Thomas as she was known to the business world, had become a fixture in financial news. "Did you see the article in the Times yesterday?" Kelly asked. "They're calling her the encryption queen now." Diane hadn't seen it, but she wasn't surprised. Renee's algorithm had proven to be exactly what she'd claimed: revolutionary protection against quantum computing attacks. Even as the government investigated her, they were also negotiating to license her technology. "What about the guy who was watching your old house? Any news on that front?" Kelly asked. Diane shook her head. "Nothing concrete. The FBI questioned me about it again last week, but they still won't tell me who he was working for, whether it was a foreign government, a competitor, or someone else entirely." The memory of those tense days after Newport still made her shiver. They hadn't returned to the old house immediately. Instead, Renee had insisted they stay at a secure location, a luxury hotel under fake names, while her security team swept the house and neighborhood for surveillance. When they'd finally confirmed that someone had indeed been watching the house, planting small cameras in nearby trees and even tampering with their Wi-Fi, Diane had realized that perhaps Renee's paranoia hadn't been so irrational after all. "Do you ever regret it?" Kelly asked, breaking into her thoughts. "The settlement, I mean. You could have fought for a lot more than you took." The question was fair. Diane had surprised everyone, her lawyer, Renee's team, and even herself, by asking for much less than she was entitled to as Renee's spouse in a community property state. "I only wanted enough to be secure and to start the foundation," Diane replied. "Fighting for half of everything would have meant years in court, endless publicity, and probably helping whoever was after her technology to get it through legal discovery." "Very noble," Kelly said, not unkindly. Most people wouldn't be so generous to someone who lied to them for years. Diane gazed out at the darkening sky, considering her response. It wasn't entirely about generosity. The money. It never felt real to me, and after seeing what Renee went through to get it, The constant looking over her shoulder, the double life. I'm not sure I wanted that burden. Inside, her phone chimed again. This time, Diane went to check it, leaving Kelly on the balcony. The notification wasn't from her lawyer as she'd expected. It was from a secure messaging app that only one person ever used to contact her. Renee. The message was brief. Turn on the news. A flutter of anxiety rose in Diane's chest as she reached for the remote and turned on the television, flipping to a 24-hour news channel. Breaking news in the Phoenix Dynamics investigation, a serious-looking anchor was saying. Riley Thomas, the enigmatic founder and CEO, has reportedly struck a deal with federal prosecutors. While details remain confidential, sources close to the investigation tell us that Thomas has agreed to work with government agencies to implement her encryption technology across critical infrastructure in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Kelly had come in from the balcony and now stood beside Diane, watching the news with wide eyes. She did it, Diane murmured. She actually pulled it off. Is this good news? Kelly asked, sounding uncertain. I think so, Diane replied slowly. It means she's not going to prison. And it means her work will be used to protect people. Not sold to the highest bidder. The news continued, showing footage of Renee looking polished and confident, leaving a government building surrounded by lawyers and security. She had lost the casual, slightly disheveled look of the IT consultant Diane had lived with, and fully embraced the persona of Riley Thomas, tech visionary. Diane's phone chimed once more. Another message from Renee. It's over. We're safe now. Can we talk? In person? Diane stared at the message, her heart racing. After 6 months of encrypted emails and brief, carefully worded texts, Renee wanted to meet face to face. What are you going to do? Kelly asked, reading over her shoulder. I don't know, Diane admitted. The anger and betrayal that had consumed her in the early days had gradually given way to a more complex set of emotions. Understanding, regret, even a reluctant admiration for what Renee had accomplished. Do you still love her? Kelly's question was gentle but direct. Diane set her phone down, turning away from the news footage of her estranged wife. I love the person I thought she was, she said finally. The real Renee, or Riley, or whoever she actually is, I barely know her. Maybe it's time you found out, Kelly suggested. The danger's past. The secrets are out. What's stopping you? It was a fair question. The settlement was finalized. The investigation was apparently winding down. The threat that had forced them apart seemed to be neutralized. Fear, probably, Diane admitted. Fear that the person I meet won't be the woman I spent 12 years with. Or worse, fear that she will be, and I'll realize that even the parts I thought were real were just another act. Kelly squeezed her shoulder sympathetically. You don't have to decide tonight. But as the evening wore on and Kelly eventually left, Diane found herself drawn back to her phone, to that simple question waiting for her response. Can we talk? In person? After midnight sleep still eluding her, she finally typed a reply. When and where? The response came almost immediately. Tomorrow. Our spot on the beach noon. Our spot. The quiet stretch of shoreline where they'd exchanged vows 12 years ago. Promising to love and honor each other for better or worse. Renee had remembered. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, a perfect autumn day. Diane dressed carefully in jeans and a soft sweater. Casual but put together. She told herself it didn't matter what she wore, but still found herself checking her appearance more carefully than she had in months. The drive to the beach took just under an hour, as she parked and made her way toward the shore. Memories washed over her like the tide. Their wedding day, picnics on summer afternoons, quiet walks at sunset when the tourists had gone. She spotted Renee immediately, a solitary figure standing near the water's edge, hands in the pockets of her coat, hair blowing in the gentle breeze. Without the trappings of either of her personas, neither the struggling IT consultant nor the wealthy tech CEO, she looked somehow both familiar and like a stranger. Diane approached slowly, her footsteps muffled by the sand. When she was just a few feet away, Renee turned, as if sensing her presence. You came, Renee said softly, her eyes searching Diane's face. I said I would. Diane stopped, maintaining a careful distance between them. For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of waves and distant seagulls filled the silence. You look good, Renee offered finally. The foundation suits you. I've been following your work. Thank you, Diane replied. Congratulations on your deal with the government. Renee nodded, glancing out at the horizon. It's not perfect, but it's the best outcome I could have hoped for. My technology will help people, not harm them. Is that why you wanted to meet? To tell me about your deal? No. Renee turned back to her, something vulnerable in her expression. I wanted to give you this. She held out a small velvet box. Diane hesitated before taking it, opening it cautiously. Inside was a key. Not a house key or a car key, but an old-fashioned, ornate key that might open an antique chest or cabinet. What is this? Diane asked, confused. It's a key to a safe deposit box, Renee explained. Inside is everything about me. My original birth certificate. Photos from my childhood. The notebook where I first sketched the algorithm that changed my life. Letters I wrote to you but never sent. All of it. Diane stared at the key, understanding its significance. Your past. No more secrets, Renee said quietly. No more lies. Whether you want me in your life or not, I wanted you to have this. To know that I trust you with everything I am. Diane closed her hand around the key, feeling its weight, physical and symbolic. Thank you. I know I hurt you, Renee continued, her voice catching slightly. I know I broke your trust in the worst possible way. I'm not asking for forgiveness or for another chance. I just wanted you to know that what we had, the quiet moments, the laughter, the love, that was real. The only real thing in my complicated, messed-up life. The sincerity in her voice made Diane's carefully maintained composure waver. 6 months of processing, of rebuilding, of moving forward. And still, standing here with Renee felt like both an ending and a beginning. I'm not ready to make any decisions today, Diane said honestly. About us, about the future. I need time. I understand, Renee nodded. I have time now. For the first time in 20 years, I'm not running from anything. They stood together on the beach, two people with a shared past and an uncertain future, the key to long-held secrets resting between them like a promise. Would you like to walk for a while? Diane asked finally. Just walk and talk? No pressure, no decisions, just reconnecting? A genuine smile spread across Renee's face, not the confident smirk of Riley Thomas, tech mogul, nor the careful half-smile of Renee Taylor, struggling IT consultant. Just a real smile, hopeful and a little uncertain. I'd like that very much, she said. As they began to walk along the shoreline, keeping a respectful distance but moving in the same direction, Diane felt something she hadn't expected. Possibility. Not forgiveness, not yet. Not reconciliation, not immediately. But the possibility of understanding, of truth, of whatever might come next. And for today, that was enough.